Tensions between Iran and the United States have escalated sharply after Tehran announced that it will not participate in the planned second round of negotiations in Islamabad. Well, the decision coming just days before a ceasefire deadline has cast serious doubt over already fragile diplomatic efforts. Well, let us understand that why did Iran withdraw from the talks? Iranian state media confirmed that there are no plans for further negotiations at this stage, and Tehran also rejected reports of a scheduled meeting in Islamabad, calling them false and part of a media game and pressure strategy by Washington. Officials in Iran argue that the current atmosphere does not support meaningful dialogue, pointing to US excessive demands, frequent shifts in negotiating positions, repeated contradictions in the US statements. Well, how Iran is blaming the United States? Let us understand about it. Notably, Tehran has directly held Washington responsible for the collapse in talks. Iranian officials accuse the US of making unrealistic demands and constantly changing its stance, also maintaining what Iran describes as a naval blockade on its ports. Iran claims that all these actions violate the ceasefire framework and undermine any remaining diplomatic trust. Well, Iran's first Vice President Mohammad Reza Aref further criticized the Washington, saying that the US promotes peace publicly while simultaneously increasing pressure behind the scenes. Now, it has raised another question, that how maritime tensions are fueling the crisis. Notably, the diplomatic breakdown is being mirrored by rising tensions at sea, particularly in the Strait of Hormuz, a key global energy route. And recent developments include reports of increased naval confrontations, allegations of US action against an Iranian-flagged vessel, Iran describing such incidents as armed piracy. Tehran has also accused the US of enforcing a blockade it calls collective punishment, further intensifying the entire confrontation. Well, what has been the US warning and how far could it go? US President Donald Trump has issued a strong warning stating that Iran could face severe consequences if it refuses to accept a deal. He suggested that key infrastructure, including power plants and bridges, could be targeted if diplomacy fails. He also announced that US representatives including Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner would travel to Pakistan for ceasefire-related discussions. That is an initiative that Iran has now rejected. Well, are diplomatic channels still open after all these conflicting signals from Washington? Despite rising tensions, some US officials have offered a more optimistic outlook. US Energy Secretary Chris Wright stated that negotiations are still ongoing behind the scenes and suggested that a deal may still be possible. He described Donald Trump as a creative negotiator and said that progress is being made, even as public rhetoric remains sharply confrontation. And how the crisis is affecting the region and global economy. Well, the standoff is already spilling into global markets and regional stability. And key impacts include rising oil prices due to supply fears, increased risk to shipping routes in the Strait of Hormuz, merchant vessels reportedly rerouting after security incidents. And as one of the world's most critical oil transit corridors, any disruption in the strait carries significant global economic implications. What happens as the ceasefire deadline approaches? Well, the current ceasefire arrangement is set to expire on April 22, and with Iran withdrawing from talks and both the sides hardening their positions, uncertainty over the agreement is growing rapidly. And where does this leave the Iran-US standoff? Well, with negotiations collapsing, maritime tensions rising, and increasingly aggressive political messaging, the Iran-US standoff appears to be entering a more volatile phase. And as the deadline nears, diplomatic options are narrowing, raising concerns that the region could be heading towards further escalation. That's all for now. Stay tuned to the Surveyor for more updates. Do like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.